Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette. Konnichiwa and welcome to episode 150 of Movie Oubliette, the multi-continental podcast for forgotten fantastical films with me, Conrad, going to the Millennium Dome in Cambridge, UK.
And me, Dan, surrounded by less boxes, but in a new location down here in Melbourne, Australia.
We focus on forgotten fantasy, sci-fi and horror films because we love zombie dance numbers, suicide by key fob, and claymation soup demons.
Oh,
hello, Dan.
Yes. Conrad, you don't like dance numbers, do you?
Well, Michael Jackson's Thriller was quite big in the 80s.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that,
yes.
and that's what it reminded me of.
Yes.
But, more on that later.
So what have you been up to, Conrad?
So today I'm going to the Millennium Dome with my brother, or as it's known now, the O2.
Okay.
Big venue, entertainment venue in the centre of London. And it was originally built, this massive dome, for the turn of the millennium. It was going to be this big exhibition space, but it was a huge flop and very few people went to it. So then they turned it into a massive arena, and now it's a very popular venue for concerts and such. But I've never been there before, so I'm looking forward to going.
What are you going to see again? Sorry, I zoned out a bit.
That's fine. I'm going to see the band Keane, the British band. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I love Keane. Well, I love the first two albums when back in the early 2000s, late 2010s.
Well, yeah, I'm going to make you feel old here. They're celebrating the 20th anniversary of their first album, Hopes and Fears.
Wow.
So that's what they're playing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I used to love them. Yeah.
Yeah. Tom Chaplin. I'm looking forward to seeing them. I think it'll be fun.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So yes, listeners, if you don't know, I have moved. I live in a new location now. We bought a house. I'm still unpacking in the studio, and you might hear that I'm using a different microphone. But yeah, it's a bit of a mess in here. But and it might sound a bit more echoey as well because I haven't put all the sound treatment up yet. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Well, it's fewer boxes than the last time I saw you.
Yes. So the main part of this episode we recorded last week because we had a guest on. So now we're recording all the other bits. Piece it all together.
A bit of behind-the-scenes fun for the 150th episode.
Yes, that's quite a milestone, isn't it, Conrad?
Yeah. I know. I'm impressed with this. So we didn't do anything special because 150, I don't know, doesn't feel like as big a milestone as 100.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Once you've gone past 100, it's just every, is it century that we celebrate?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do something at 200 if we get there. Yeah. That'll be great.
Yes. Yeah. So, Conrad, anything in the mailbag today for our 150th episode?
We do. So we heard from Wicked Person on Time Rider, who said, watched the film and quite enjoyed any part where he was riding his bike to the faux Joe Satriani music. The other parts were pretty boring, though.
Yeah, I kind of found the bike riding parts kind of boring too.
Yeah, I did. I'd never heard of Joe Satriani, and I'm probably pronouncing it totally wrong.
Oh, he's pretty renowned, very, very notable guitarist.
Apparently best-selling instrumental rock guitarist of all time.
Yeah, he's up there.
Chazilla said, I've never really liked that diarrhea sound dirt bikes make. That's strike one right there. The openings, credits, and first 15 minutes were almost impossible to get through. If you can get through that, it might be worth a late night watch.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of padding in the movie. It really could have been condensed down.
Yeah, 90 minutes. Yeah. Hugo Rioja said, I just heard the podcast, haven't seen the movie, but my God, traveling in time without knowing? I wish I was in the creative meeting of the movie to say, what's the point then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is the point? He didn't even know he was getting saved at the end.
No. It's ridiculous. Of course, we heard from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures. Hello, Serge.
Hey, Serge.
And he said, Time Rider's batshit premise is only matched by its meandering pace. A rider gets transported to the Old West without his knowledge, so he sort of just rides around the desert for 3/4 of this film until a last-minute rescue that ends the conflict just as suddenly as it began. There are some interesting set pieces, but usually when a hero is this clueless, it's played for laughs, whereas here, he's sort of just there, marking time, until someone saves him from a problem he doesn't know he has.
Yes. Yep.
His great-great-grandmother also fucks him at gunpoint within minutes of meeting him, so there's that too.
Yeah. It's a lot of points that we covered. Yeah. Definitely.
It's a good summary. And finally, Film Aficionado said, I'm glad that time travel doesn't exist, if only because A Treatise on the Ethics of Nookie Across Space-Time Continuum by Lyle Swan is a book best left unwritten.
Oh, yes.
Very, very true. Yes, thank you everyone for getting in touch. We always love hearing from you.
Yeah, we do.
So, Dan, what are we doing this time?
Well, let's find out. I'm in some sort of a Japanese living room.
It smells nice.
Yeah, something's bubbling on the table. A stew of some sort. Oh, and there's a dead body over there in the corner.
Oh.
All right, here's a movie just on the table. I'll come back.
What's in my soup?
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back, Dan. What do we have for our 150th episode?
Yes, so today we are going to be covering a horror comedy musical from 2001, The Happiness of the Katakuris, a Japanese film. It's directed by Takashi Miike, written by Kikumi Yamagishi, and it stars Kenji Sawada, Kiko Matsuzaka, Shinji Takeda, Naomi Nishida, Kiyoshiro Imawano, and Tetsuro Tanba. Yeah, that was a that was a mouthful. I'm sorry if I butchered those names.
I've never heard of any of those people.
I think I've heard of a few, but yeah. Anyway.
So what happens in this movie?
Yes, well, it's the Katakuri family are down on their luck, guest house owners suffering from divorce, job loss, and for one, even jail time. Ooh. One day, a guest arrives and everything changes. Unfortunately, instead of a bustling business, they are gifted with a dead body.
Oh.
And as more guests arrive, more dead bodies pile up. But how long can they keep up their corpse cover-ups to maintain their accommodation and reputation? And will they ever stop singing? Oh yes, it's a horror musical with delusional, lovesick daydreams, choreographed dancing, corpses getting their boogie on, and big-budget claymation special effects set pieces. You won't guess what each scene brings because every scene feels like a different movie. Let's talk about The Happiness of the Katakuris.
Oh, a musical. I can't wait.
Yeah, yes. And as I mentioned before, we will be joined by a guest.
Well, let's see who they are after the break.
All right, we are back today. We are thrilled to have with us a film journalist and online content creator, currently a member of the Cascadia Film and Television Critics Association, and an endless wealth of knowledge for obscure film from any decade. Not to mention, she has her own podcast, McFly's Movie House. We have with us Marta Djordjevic, aka Marta McFly. Hello.
Ooh,
Welcome.
hello. What a lovely, lovely intro. Thank you so much. That was so kind of you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, I first discovered you on TikTok, and you talk about movies I've never heard of, like never ever heard of, from every decade of cinema, which is incredible. So maybe tell our listeners where you're from, and a little bit about what you would talk about in terms of movies.
For sure. Yeah. So I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. And as you said, I'm a film journalist. I'm currently over at Slash Film, but I've taken a bit of a pause with my writing just to work on the podcast, of course, because that eats up a lot of time.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I've been interested in movie discovery since I was a kid. I think what got me into it was watching Pulp Fiction for the first time. And my parents coming into the room and they're like, well, did you know this was inspired by this, this, and this? And it blew my mind, right? I was 14. What do I know?
Yeah.
And then I just started digging into movies. It's so interesting to me to learn the building blocks of cinema because it influences so much that we watch today.
Yeah, it really does. Like, I'm always so surprised at the range of movies you cover on your platforms. Just so many foreign films, a lot of art house, like movies I've never heard of.
I mean, I see it as film preservation, right? It's oral film preservation. So, especially nowadays with all these streaming services that will get rid of some of their library each month,
Yeah.
people forget about these movies, right? And it's such a shame. And I think discussion just keeps it alive.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, today we are going to be covering a movie that it's been on my watch list for years and years because I am quite a big Takashi Miike fan. I've watched a bunch of his movies and they're all so different. But today it's going to be The Happiness of the Katakuris. So let's start off with, how did you come across this movie and what's your sort of history with this movie and Takashi Miike as well?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's a great question. I couldn't tell you. I think, trying to think, I mean, Takashi Miike, he's, like you said, his entire filmography is so different. Everything is so different. And if you look at his filmography as well, it's over 100 movies. I think he's done 115 between the early 90s to today.
Yeah, his output is
It's
like
insane.
insane.
Yeah. How do you do that much? I know. So I think what happened with me was I watched obviously Audition and Ichi the Killer, and then it was just one of those where I looked at his filmography on Letterboxd and I saw this cover that looked like The Sound of Music,
Yeah.
and that's what hooked me. And I'm like, I need to watch this. I need to know what this is, and I guess that's it. Yeah.
How about you, Conrad? Had you seen this movie before?
No, I'd never seen it before. And I'm sort of entry level Miike. So I've seen Audition and Ishi the Killer, and that's it. So
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of his incredibly prolific output. And let's just say I wouldn't have been drawn to the musical first.
Yeah. Conrad is famously not a fan of musicals.
I'm picky too. I'm very selective.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is a horror musical comedy, I guess. I've seen quite a few Miike movies, like mainly his kind of crime thrillers or like sort of mafia yakuza movies. So yeah, Ichi the Killer is it falls into that category kind of. And Dead or Alive, his Dead or Alive trilogy, especially the first one. The second and the third one are just like go off the rails. It's almost like they're not sequels as well. It's just really weird. And then Fudo, The New Generation, is just an incredible like revenge movie. And then I've also seen The Great Yokai War, which is almost like a fantasy family kids movie, which is it's his range is insane. So yeah, this movie, Happiness of the Katakuris, it's a musical, but it's also every other genre at the same time.
Absolutely. What's interesting as well is this was done by Shochiko Studios, which I don't know if you guys know too much about. Do you?
No, I
No.
don't.
So Shochiko Studios, that's one of the oldest studios in Japan.
Right.
Not the oldest. I think it's been around since 1920. But they're really famous for their familial dramas and comedies. And notably, Yasujiro Ozu worked with them his entire life.
Oh, wow.
So
Right.
to me, it's just so interesting for Shochiku Studios, who has, Yasujiro Ozu, Mikio Naruse, all these other prolific filmmakers, for decades later for them to do this.
Yeah.
It's just what's going on.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, the movie that came to mind when I first watched this was the 1977 movie Hausu, which, yeah, again, just like really batshit crazy. Just you don't know what to expect with every scene. It seems like this movie specifically, in particular, it changes movie every scene. I mean, even every musical number, it's like a different style of music. Sometimes it's like a cabaret samba, and sometimes it feels like a karaoke. You're watching karaoke, and it's just like quite unpredictable. And then you've got claymation at the same time. It's just thrown in there. Like, what was his sort of approach to this?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I mean, and at the same time, I find that those musical segments were also very catchy. Like as I was
Yeah.
getting ready for this episode right now, I was humming in the bathroom.
Right.
One of the segments, I think the last one. So they're great. And yeah, the karaoke segment, that's also fantastic. It's a literal karaoke segment.
Yeah, it's got the words and the
Yeah.
lights that light up the words as well. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. I did find kind of the it's almost like absurdist cinema. It's really pushing you as a an audience member, like, because it goes quite dark, but then it's incredibly funny at the same time. How did you find it, Conrad?
Utterly baffling. But I think the key to it for me, I think, was certainly you need two watches. The first time I watched it, I was just being assaulted. I had no idea what was happening. And it was only through the second watch that I could start to piece together, first of all, the visual language of what it was trying to do, and also some of the themes that are running throughout the film. But I think the key to unlocking it for me was suddenly realizing that it's being narrated by the little girl, Yuri, as an adult. So she is reflecting back on her childhood, I think. Because it's an
interesting.
adult's voice you can hear on the soundtrack, but it is actually from the perspective of a child. So if you imagine this is the way that Yuri remembers her childhood with this weird, funky family that she loves, because she says that she knows she's going to grow up to be cool because her family's cool.
Yeah.
So she thinks these guys are all great.
Right.
So all of the animation and the song and dance numbers and the different styles from one scene to the next, and also the aesthetic of the film, because the thing that struck me about it is it kind of looks like first wave YouTuber aesthetics. It definitely looks like video, not film. And it's got all of these compositing shots that are like, they almost look like they're just deliberately bad. Because this is 2001.
Yeah.
And it just has this sort of deliberately shonky aesthetic that it's just leaning into because it doesn't care. So I even think he's incorporating different visual media that were popular at the time.
Absolutely.
It is digital, right? It's digital video that it's been shot on.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's, like you said, Conrad, deliberately making it look terrible as well.
Yeah.
Like it looked really flat and ugly and like almost not color graded at all. The lighting on most of the scenes is quite bad, but intentional. So you can't sort of fault that. Like, it's not like Birdemic where that's just terrible filmmaking. Whereas this is like deliberate. And so like, all of those kind of the green screen flying scenes are like awful looking, but that's the point. That's kind of what he was going for. And the fact that it is definitely a comedy.
Absolutely. It's interesting that this came out the same year as Ichi the Killer,
Yeah.
which, if you think about it even visually, what Ichi the Killer looks like, if you set aside all the gore and the blood and the carnage, the way that Ichi the Killer is shot could not be more different to this.
Yeah.
So it's not even a matter of budget restraints or anything like that. As you guys were saying, I think it is 1000% deliberate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's another film that he did, Visitor Q, which has a similar look to it. It has a very similar digital kind of flatness. I haven't watched it, but I've seen clips of it. And yeah, so I do think maybe it is a budget thing. Maybe he just wanted to do this like quirky, wacky musical horror. And he was just like, well, I could be cheap on digital, and it's this like silly movie. No one's going to watch it anyway. I mean, he outputs like 2-3 movies a year. It's insane. I don't know how he has any time at all.
Yeah. Well, in this year, he did 6.
Wow.
So 2001, he did Family, Family 2, Visitor Q, Ichi the Killer, Agitator, and The Happiness of Katakuris, which he just finished before Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Casually. I read that it was like a production member spoke to a journalist, and they said that they shot the movie itself in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is
incredible.
Bananas.
That gives you, some appreciation as to why it's so clumsy sometimes, because some of it is pretty clunky.
Yeah.
There are bits where, like the character Richard Sagawa takes flight, he's on wires, obviously.
Yeah.
And because the setting is basically a toxic dump, I think, it's a rubbish dump, a piece of rubbish that's being blown by the fans to create a sort of swirling atmospheric effect. A bit of it gets stuck on his wires. They don't go for a second take, they just leave it in. It's fine. Scenes like the scene where the family's arguing about what to do with the body of the sumo wrestler that's died in their guest house. It's so badly shot.
Yeah.
Half the time the camera is not even on the person who's speaking, and it's clearly shot in a very confined space. Some of it is just so shonky, but then hearing that it was done in 2 weeks, you just think, well, they just went for it. And considering the complexity of what they came up with, it's quite admirable.
I mean, it's a musical, so they're having to do like, singing as well. I mean,
And
obviously
dancing.
recorded. Yeah, and choreographed dancing. I mean, again, some of it is not exactly tight.
Yeah. Well, some of them had experience in music or musicals. I know the wife, Terue, I think is her name. But that actress was trained in classical dance. So she knew what she was doing. And then the dad, played by Kenji Sawada, he was a Japanese pop star for decades.
Wow.
So that's his background. So I feel like those two could dance.
Yeah.
The rest of them, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I was most impressed with the son.
Shinji Takeda?
Yeah, he's I think by trade a saxophonist, so he is a musician. But I thought his dance moves were great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed
He's
that.
also great. He was in Pulse. I don't know if you guys have seen Pulse.
Pulse is devastating. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I do feel like every time they wanted what would normally be a high budget scene, they just switched to claymation. And then
Yes.
it's suddenly everyone's claymation for no reason. But then obviously comedy as well, because every so often the live action faces will pop up on the claymation. I guess because they didn't have time to do like lip sync claymation. Who's got time for that? So, a lot of these kind of action scenes are just suddenly claymation. The volcanic eruption at the end, I mean, like, what? The house getting thrown down the hill. It's insane. But I did want to ask, what was the significance of that sort of little demon creature thing? What was the point of that?
I have no idea. I've thought about this for so long this morning, and I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, those of you that want a mental picture of like what we're talking about, we've got a character at the start just eating soup, and then she puts her fork into some sort of weird winged claymation creature who then rips her tonsils out, and then she dies. And then it flies away and gets eaten by a crow. And then the crow gets eaten by a Wolverine teddy bear.
Yes.
It's just like, what is going on?
And then the great-grandfather of the Katakuris knocks the crow out of the sky after it's been reborn again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then begins all of their misfortune. And then at the end of the movie, he knocks another crow out of the sky, and then everything goes fine for them after that. So supposedly on the commentary, the director, Takahashi Miike, says that you only need to watch the opening claymation sequence to understand the whole movie.
Right. Okay.
He talks about birth and death and rebirth and the circle of life and the food chain.
Right.
And I think that relates to the film in a couple of ways. One is that the family is in this situation. The father lost his job. They've moved out to this guest house, which they're hoping sort of Bates Motel-like. The road will come by and their business will flourish.
Yeah.
And he's lost his job because of there was this massive economic stagnation in Japan from the early 90s until the 2000s. In fact, I think it's still going on. And the father believes that with this guest house, they'll achieve economic success and they'll be happy. But what he actually learns during the course of the film, what they all learn, is that through bonding together over having to dispose of the bodies of all of the guests that keep dying in their guest house, not because of them, there was no Bates mother involved. They discover that the happiness of the Katakuris was just them being together and being a family. And there's this whole sort of death, rebirth, the deaths in the house being blown up and moved down a hill because of a volcano exploding, and a death of a significant character right at the end of the movie when you've just had your "we're all happy" number, and then they kill the end of the movie with you. By the way, this person just died. Roll credits, hurrah. So just this sense that, life, death and rebirth and just being happy, being together is kind of the theme of the movie, I think. And the other thing that makes it a bit meta is that the film itself, I think, is a remake of a South Korean movie called The Quiet Family, directed by none other than Kim Ji-woon, the guy who did A Tale of Two Sisters.
I would love to watch the original. I haven't seen the South Korean one, so I'm curious how different they are. I mean, I know they are different, but how different?
Yeah. Miike did ask the director of the original what he thought of his remake. He didn't say.
Okay.
I think that was probably the wisest move.
Yeah.
That movie is nothing like this. That's a really serious sort of dark comedy drama, and Takashi Miike reimagines it into this musical fever dream with claymation sequences, and it's just rebirth, reimagining. The circle of life, I guess. It's the best I could do in terms of rationalizing it. I tried very hard.
I think you did a good job. It's such an endearing movie, weirdly enough. Like, that's what I find so bizarre about this, is it's heartfelt.
Yeah, I think it's because the characters, because they're so sort of down on their luck. And it's also like the 4 generations of a family. You've got your great-grandfather, the grandparents, who are not old whatsoever. They look like they're in their 30s. And then you've got the daughter, who doesn't look that much younger than they are, and she's been divorced. And then she's also got a daughter. So it's all this, all these generations of this family and their misfortune in life. So you do really connect with them and how they're trying so hard to sort of do better, but they keep kind of making these mistakes. But actually, the dead bodies is not anything to do with them. It's just like a coincidence, I guess.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, because there are some, I mean, that first scene with the first guest, I don't want to spoil anything, but you have all that fog that comes up in the room. It almost starts feeling like an 80s horror movie for a little bit, to me at least.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, and then you start wondering at that point, you're like, oh, is there something supernatural going on? Is it just bad luck? What is it exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people do mention this movie as being the most disturbing movie that you could ever watch, because it is so disturbing, because you have these horrific scenes with like horror elements. Like we'll just go into spoilers, but the bigger guy that ends up dying, and they're trying to figure out where the schoolgirl that he's with, which is questionable,
to say the least.
is, and they can't find her, but then they realize she's been crushed under this guy, and it's a horrifying scene. It's almost like the Ring level horror. But then they sort of deal with these traumatic scenes with musical numbers in a completely polar opposite tone, and that's so disturbing for me.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think I wrote that in my notes as well, that for the majority of the musical segments, not all of them, but for the majority of them, they seem to happen in the most macabre moments of the film.
Yeah. I mean, when they find the first body, it goes into like Rocky Horror Picture Show, sort of like theatrics.
That is the most bizarre montage. It's just like one after the other coming into the room and screaming their heads off in this really stylized, bizarrely lit shot where they're holding a tableau pose, each of them as they come in. It's so odd, so odd. And then the flip side to that is that you have other musical numbers that come out of nowhere, like the karaoke scene where the husband and wife just like bring the movie to a complete standstill so that they can profess their love for each other through the art of 80s karaoke. And then at the end of that, they stop and then they're sat sort of wistfully together. And then one says, "We've got to dig the bodies back up and rebury them, haven't we?" Yes. It's like, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
So it goes from wistful to macabre again.
And just also in the musical numbers, they all seem to be inspired by something else. Like you also have the Sound of Music at the end. You have, with the zombies dancing, that kind of reminded me of Thriller. Like it seems like he pulls from so many different things that have come before the movie.
Yeah, I also noticed that this movie came in 2001, and another movie that I feel treats like sort of misfortune or traumatic events with musical numbers is Dancer in the Dark, which came out in 2000, which is very serious, but the musical parts are kind of, they're not quirky and whimsical. Well, a little bit because it is Björk, but they're kind of her dealing with her life, which is just going downhill with these kind of happy songs, and it does have a similar sort of approach.
Yeah, it does. And Mike on the commentary track does reference it, but he's being very snarky. So I think he has a fairly low opinion of Lars von Trier's musical.
Oh, right.
I think this movie might be directly taking the piss out of it
Wow.
in a few places.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I wouldn't be surprised. He's such a character.
Yeah, he's a bit of a provocateur, and certainly his commentary is just like 2 hours of sass.
Is it?
You can't take anything seriously at all.
Wow.
All of it you have to take with a massive pinch of salt because I don't think there's a sincere word spoken in the whole thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is maybe a hot take, but I did find this movie's approach to filmmaking kind of similar to Wes Anderson. And, I mean, Wes Anderson is more kitsch and he has a very specific color palette as well, but he is going for that sort of analog style or like obvious sets, things that are obviously not realistic. And similar in this movie, it kind of goes for that really ugly digital look on purpose, as if he's trying to make it look like a bad TV movie.
Yeah, it's a choice.
Yeah, it's not on the same level as Wes Anderson in terms of aesthetics. But yeah, I mean, I recently saw Asteroid City, and I just feel like Wes needs to just reel it in just a little bit. Like it's just it's a little bit too Wes Anderson for my liking.
Yeah.
Same here, yeah. I found that the claymation scenes in this reminded me of Tim Burton a bit, kind of as well.
Yeah. Sure.
A little. The beginning especially.
Yeah,
and Wes
sure.
took a detour into stop motion animation for a while shortly after this as well. I think Fantastic Mr. Fox was 2009, wasn't it?
Yeah. I found the claymation did remind me of, there's a movie, it's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer or something. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a nightmare hellscape
Oh,
version of Tom Sawyer.
I wonder who did it.
So it's Will Vinton who did that, who also did the stop motion animation for Return to Oz. And his studio eventually turned into Leica.
Oh, right.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting. From what I found out was the claymation segments were inspired by a Czech artist or claymation maker, Jan Svankmajer. So it was supposed to be a direct nod to him.
Right.
But that's all I know in terms of inspiration, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's his Alice in Wonderland, I think, in particular, that's quite famous. I think it's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's really disturbing again. The animator was Hideki Kimura. There's apparently 6 minutes of claymation in the movie in total, and working flat out, they were managing to get 15 seconds a day.
Whoa.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And yet it looks janky as hell.
But kind of on purpose, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it
what I was wondering too. I mean, my understanding of claymation is very limited. I don't know what's good and what isn't. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it looked, on purpose, janky on purpose.
Yeah, I think it was. The whole movie was.
Yeah.
I found the sort of absurdist approach as well, similar to movies like John Dies at the End, directed by Don Coscarelli, or like the Daniels movies, Swiss Army Man and Everything Everywhere All at Once. And also like the Yorgos Lanthimos movies like The Lobster, really challenging movies and all very intentional as well.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's trying to push the boundaries. And in terms of the premise as well, with these kind of, they're not murders though, they're just deaths, I guess.
Accidents.
What are some other movies that delve into this kind of comedic horror genre? Because I thought of like movies like Fargo and like Shallow Grave, I guess.
I don't know. I feel like it's its own beast.
Yeah. I know I think there's a Scandinavian horror movie with a killer mermaid, and that's also a musical.
Oh, The Lure.
Wow.
Yeah, it's Polish.
Maybe influenced by this movie.
I haven't seen it.
I need to watch that, whatever it is.
There have been some recently, haven't there? Like Anna and the Apocalypse was a zombie musical set at Christmas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Edgar Wright's always had a very musical sensibility. So Shaun of the Dead is almost breaks into a music video occasionally, but he hasn't quite got the conviction to do it.
Yeah. They have that one scene in Shaun of the Dead though, right? With the in the bar to Queen.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. And they can't figure out how to turn off the music.
Yeah. Don't stop me now. Yeah.
I mean, talking about music, I did find the music in this movie incredibly confusing because it just kept changing the tone, not even the musical numbers, not even the singing parts, but just the music in general. It goes into like soft guitar rock, and there's atmospheric synths. And then you've got like, I think what sounds like an Irish jig.
Yeah.
Why?
I'd be curious to find out the bands and the solo career that Kenji Sawada had. I'd be curious to know what sort of music that was.
Yeah, sure.
To see if any of it is similar to any of these segments that we watch in the movie. I'm unsure. I know he was a part of a band that's really well known in Japan, apparently, called Tiger.
Okay, sure.
So maybe that's a good reference point. I have no idea.
Apparently, I did look this up. Apparently, they came out of the 60s and 70s group sounds movement, which was sparked by a live performance in Japan by the Beatles.
Wow.
So it was very much a combination of Japanese music and rock.
Interesting.
Basically, on the commentary track, they said that Kenji is sort of the Japanese Paul McCartney.
Oh, okay. Of course.
Just imagine Paul McCartney doing this.
I love that. He's a fascinating man as well. I mean, he was in Paul Schrader's Mishima.
Oh, wow.
He was in Mishima. He was in a bunch of movies by Seijun Suzuki, who's one of my favorite Japanese filmmakers.
Wow.
He's really well known. He's a really prolific artist in general.
Yeah, I think by all accounts, the whole lineup in this movie are incredibly famous in Japan.
The grandpa, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in Harakiri. which is one of the most, iconic samurai movies in Japan too. So you're right. Yeah, they come from huge backgrounds.
Yeah. So if you can imagine that, like having, Meryl Streep and Paul McCartney and, all coming together in this one $1.5 million movie that looks like a karaoke on cheap video.
Yeah.
With special effects by a YouTuber. It's utterly bizarre, unthinkable in Western culture.
Yeah. I mean, I think culturally that's what draws me to a lot of like Japanese cinema is it doesn't kind of follow any template. Like there's often the act structures are completely different. I also find the characters always deeply flawed as well, which is interesting. It's more complex. They're not just squeaky clean sort of American characters. And so, yeah, there's room for development and character arcs as well. And also with this movie, just not sticking to any genre whatsoever.
But it also does it well. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it does all these different genres so well because at the end of it, especially last night during my rewatch, I realized, well, you know what? The fact that it was done by Shochiku Studios, who did these familial dramas and comedies, in the end, this is a familial comedy. So, in some weird, twisted way,
Yeah.
the studio is still sticking to what they were doing
Yeah,
decades
yeah.
ago, but just modernized it and made it this. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm just imagining Yatsuhiro Ozu rolling in his grave, though. This couldn't be any more different from Ozu.
Yeah. So we're talking about, the characters, but we haven't really talked about one character in particular, Richard, who was is he a US Marine? But then he says he's actually a British spy, and his mother was the sister to Queen Elizabeth.
Yes.
But like a secret sister that no one knows anything about. Like,
The English as well that he throws in
Yes.
every so often.
Yeah, so apparently, even if you're looking at it and thinking that this is an incredibly mannered and stiff performance, apparently it's actually a very good performance of somebody who is speaking Japanese like an English person,
Right.
awkwardly and badly. And the guy who's playing that character, by all accounts, is the Mick Jagger in Japan, the king of hard rock.
Oh, wow.
Or was. He's no longer with us, sadly. He died of cancer in his 50s. And here he is in an officer and a gentleman Richard Gere uniform singing to synthesized pop sambas for some reason.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But apparently his character, which was, you'll be surprised to hear, not in The Quiet Family, the film on which this is based.
Oh, really?
No, wasn't in there, oddly enough. But this is based on a true story. According to the commentary, Miike says that Japanese women are particularly susceptible to con artists claiming to be members of the British royal family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This was a thing apparently in the early aughts. This was a common
Okay.
catfishing trend.
But his lie gets so much more outrageous because first he's a part of the US Navy. And then you bring in the royal family. Like it just gets so progressively more bananas.
Yeah.
And this woman just believes all of it.
Yeah, because she keeps falling in love with every guy that walks by. Yeah.
Because she thinks her route to happiness will be romance. But her arc in the movie is learning that that's not true. It's her family and her child that will bring her happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Now it's time for random trivia.
So, Dan, it's just us and it's trivia time.
Yes.
What fascinating piece of trivia did you find dead in your guest house today?
Well, did you know that the director Takashi Miike cameos in the Eli Roth movie Hostel? It's in the scene where he's warning the character Paxton in English, be careful, you could spend all your money here. And his character name in the credits is Miike Takashi, which is that's silly. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Tiny cameo.
Yes. And that's our trivia.
Yes. I've got a question for some of the other characters that keep popping up. So there's these kind of four older ladies that just keep appearing. So they appear at the start in the background, and then they also appear almost as guests, but then they run away.
Yeah.
And then I think one of them appears in that samba number as well. And I just don't understand what was the purpose of them.
I didn't pick it up that it's the same group. Are you talking about the first group of women that are hiking?
Yeah, they're all in like sort of 80s aerobics clothing or something.
Yeah.
Like tracksuits.
Well, maybe I didn't. Were they in the same clothing later on? That could be why I didn't recognize them.
I think they were.
Oh,
I didn't think they were.
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
No, because Mike does point out that one of the women is wearing a wet white t-shirt.
Okay.
And you can see her nipples, and he did that on
I
purpose.
didn't notice.
okay.
And then later on, she's in another outfit, and he says her nipples aren't visible anymore. I'd had enough of them.
Okay. Wow.
I had no idea.
It could all be lies. It might have been an accident.
Yeah.
He's a prankster and a provocateur. Who knows? I couldn't take anything he said in the commentary seriously,
Yeah.
but there you go.
Yeah.
Apparently, they represent these sort of mystic spiritualists.
Oh, okay.
And they come to the guest house, immediately notice that there's some bad omen hanging around it, and then run.
Okay.
Speaking of, I guess, bringing in that sort of supernatural element to it, I'm torn with this movie. So I'd be curious to know what you guys think. But is it supernatural or is it all a result of toxic waste? Because there is that one dance segment where we see all those, like the spillages of all that toxic waste, which leads me to wonder, is it supernatural? Because the first death that occurs makes everything feel with the fog and everything.
Yeah.
And then it feels like he abandons the supernatural aspect of it, and then it goes to toxic waste, natural disasters, et cetera, et cetera.
Actually, I'm come to think of it, I'm not sure because there is that scene where it shows the pond and it's just filled with like these empty chemical containers and like dead animals.
Yeah.
Which Richard just, throws water on his face and gets like extreme stomach problems.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm more convinced that maybe it is toxic waste, because I'm pretty sure Mika has said one of his inspirations is David Cronenberg.
Okay.
And then that makes me think that's a bit Cronenberg-esque
Yeah.
if he was to go that route.
It could be that theme of natural versus man-made pollution, because at the end the volcano takes them to happiness. The natural disaster makes everything better, and suddenly they're in the strangest backdrop I've ever seen for a movie. There's snow-capped mountains and elephants and zebras and giraffes. I'm just not even going to question it. It's fine.
That's for the sort of hills are alive with the sound of music.
Yeah.
With African animals in the background. Why?
No idea.
I'd be curious to know what I would pick up during another rewatch, because when those African animals appeared this time around, that was like the first time I saw them. I don't even remember them from my first viewing experience.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like he throws so much at you.
I mean, there's a lot to take in.
Yeah, exactly. So
It is an assault on the senses. And because it's not obeying any, as you say, any kind of genre rules or any visual language that you're accustomed to, you have to really work at it to follow what's happening even.
Yeah.
At least I did.
I mean, even some of the editing choices.
Yeah.
Like at one point, it's like glitchy on purpose. Like it keeps like almost jump cutting. And there's like dialogue at the same time. So you're trying to follow this dialogue, but it keeps kind of jump cutting. It feels like, is the movie skipping what's happening right now?
Yeah, formally it is a very strange movie.
I thought the movie was going in different directions, but then it would just, like you said, Marta, just abandon that direction. So the first death felt like, it's going to be one of those cursed house movies where it's like The Grudge, where like, everyone that comes to this house dies. But it ends up not really being like that, and more just accidental deaths. And then it's almost like you've got all these criminals coming to the house and they die. So the big guy that is obviously having sex with someone that's not supposed to be of age. And then at the end, the guy that has killed his wife. And also Richard is on the wanted poster at one point that they don't even refer back to. So I thought, is this what the movie's going for? But I don't even think that's it.
I don't know. I mean, you could argue, but this just came to me right now, so I could very well be wrong, but you could argue that all the people that show up at their lodge, maybe they tasted that water or that sewage or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, okay, right.
Maybe
So that
on the
Yeah.
way, because they all just show up out of nowhere. That's the only thing that I can think
Yeah.
of. And maybe that toxic waste is what's driving people crazy.
true. Okay.
Perhaps.
And then there's the final family who are being rained on, and they look like something straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah.
The kids coughing, the other girls playing this sort of desultory flute,
Yeah.
like something out of a horror movie. They look like they're ghosts already. But they're just a poor family that are down on their luck, and they stay in the smallest room together, and then they leave and they're happy and everything's fine.
Yeah, they don't die.
No.
Yeah.
The spell is broken.
That was a great gag with the cord that ends up just being to tie the kids' pants together.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
I love that.
The mum asking for rope, and they all think that she's going to hang herself with it.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that the son and the great grandfather are out digging a massive hole, just ready to bury this whole family.
So
And then they're fine.
who was the person that fell in that hole?
I think it was the guy who killed his wife, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
the guy
yeah,
at the
yeah.
end. Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked away for a second and then what just happened? A guy fell in the hole and they sort of start just shoveling soil on him as if he's already dead, but he's not. But then they bring him back to the guest house and clean him up and he wakes up and like
Right.
I mean, it's very confusing. Like he's barely in the shot as well when he falls in the hole. So I thought the bush moved or something.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what happened.
I thought it was a crew member.
Yeah, maybe it was, and they just put it in the movie. We'll put it in the story.
Possibly. Yeah.
Why not?
I was watching an interview with Takashi Miike where he says that none of his movies have a positive worldview. He's very negative, and that's because he thinks that this is just how the world is. So he always tries to have that in all of his movies.
Wow, yeah.
And that's the reason why he made one of the central characters die in the end. He just threw that in there the last minute because he was like, this is too happy. Something bad needs to happen. And that was his solution.
Okay, right. Yeah. I mean, it's true. Like, I don't think any of his movies have happy endings. Or just the endings are completely absurd as well. Like the ending of Dead or Alive is, you think this whole movie is just like a kind of a Yakuza like gang war movie. But then it turns to like Dragon Ball Z at the end. And they're throwing like fireballs at it. It's like, what?
He just has fun, truly.
Yeah,
He does.
He does.
And at the end of this one, the note he ends it on is humankind will eventually lose the battle for natural selection. We're all doomed. The end.
Yeah.
I had to rewind that because I was in shock at that statement at the end. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Yeah.
I had to watch it twice. Yeah.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Okay, it's everyone's special time of the pod, the Mobley Awards. It's just me and Conrad for this one. It's a segment where we nominate our favourite singing, dancing, dying parts of the film in a number of confusingly whimsical yet disturbing categories.
Best quote.
My favourite quote, and it's one that I was disappointed to see, is in IMDb as well, because I always like to pick one that isn't. But it's the line that comes from the narrator, Yuri, and she's introducing all of her family members, and she says, "Great grandpa lives an easy life, telling lies and being selfish." Lovely.
Oh, he's living the dream.
He is, yeah. I just love that in amongst all these sort of happy intros, there's that, which seems like really damning, but she says it with such love and affection.
Yeah.
It's like, he's earned it. He's
Yeah.
retired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My favorite quote is from Richard, the US Marine, when he's talking to Shizui, the daughter, the divorced daughter, after she points out that he's got a bleeding nose, and he replies, "My nose isn't bleeding because I'm horny. The blood is rushing to enhance my critical faculties, and as I have much more blood than a Japanese, it surges uncontrollably beyond all reason." Like, wow. What a charmer. Why a woman not falling for him?
Well, everybody seemingly does. I mean, I
Wow.
think he's a serial con man, isn't he? That's why he gets the wanted poster.
Yeah. Well, works every time then.
Best hair or costume?
My favourite costumes in the film were the Sun's shirts, Mazuyuki.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on with there. One of them has, "Yes, I'm here, one,"
Yeah.
but backwards, which
Yes.
doesn't make any sense at all. And then later on he has one that says, "There is a risk of losing your way in life," which I thought might be a play on those white shirts with black bold letters on that Wham used to wear in their videos in the 80s, like "Choose Life" and all that kind of thing. Maybe it was, instead of just "choose life" and all these sort of simple positive messages,
Yeah.
Mike has, "There is a risk of losing your way in life." And I think it's quite important that it's the Sun wearing it, because he did lose his way in life.
Yeah.
He became a criminal for a while. So
Yeah.
Most naughty moment.
I mean, I would say the most naughty thing about this movie is like the rise of digital film. I mean, digital movies. It was shot digitally. So apparently it goes back as far as 1996 with the movie Windhorse. But Dancer in the Dark, which we mentioned in 2000, was shot on digital camera. And Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is often cited as the first digitally shot blockbuster, which came out in 2002. Coincidentally, we're recording this on Star Wars Day.
Yes.
It is May the 4th.
may the 4th be with you.
And I do remember Collateral coming out, and all the critics and posters were saying, "Oh, it's a digital film. I mean, digital movie," and that came out in 2004. So yeah, obviously Takashi Miike is really sort of leaning into the shittiness of early digital media.
He is,
yeah.
And I think, again, it's a piss take, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
he's deliberately making it look awful.
Yeah, he really is. Naughties for you. What's the most naughties thing?
For me, it was the spate of postmodern shit musicals.
Oh, yes.
So we've mentioned Lars von Trier's Dancer in the Dark, which is, as I said, jokingly referred to in the commentary as an inspiration, if only for parody. Apparently, Kenneth Branagh did a musical adaptation of Shakespeare's Love's Labour Lost,
Oh, okay.
which has got Alicia Silverstone and Matthew Lillard in it. Anyway, it was a massive flop, and it resulted in him losing his 3-picture deal with Miramax.
Oh, wow.
Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge in 2001.
Yeah. I love that.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch, Chicago producers, Rent, so lots of stage musicals being adapted.
Favorite scene?
I did not have a favourite scene in this movie, but I did have a favourite shot.
Yes.
Which I mentioned that I love the son, the Katakuris son, his dance moves. And there was a scene towards the end where all of the men of the Katakuris are all sort of vying to be the person who's going to sacrifice themselves to the police
That's right.
on behalf of the family. And there's this great shot where the son sort of like, he's got a loose shirt on, and I think he puts his arms out behind him,
Yeah.
leaves blowing
that's
past
right.
him.
Yeah.
And it looks like a manga shot or a Michael Jackson video or something. And I thought, that's a great shot.
Yeah. Yeah, they did
So yeah,
employ use of wind machines and fans a lot in this movie.
they did. Yeah, to great effect. So I enjoyed that. I thought that was a great shot.
Yeah. My favorite scene is a scene that is just probably just the most batshit crazy. This fight scene between the grandpa and Richard. They're both sort of tumbling down this hill in claymation, because it's in the claymation. And they're like
Yeah, of
they're
course.
falling off the cliff, and they're grasping at these like tree roots. And then Shizui ends up making the choice to save her grandpa and kicks a rock onto Richard, and he plummets into the ravine below. That is just like a crazy scene.
Most cliche moment.
I spotted a fun horror cliche in this that we've mentioned several times on this podcast. It is where somebody wakes up after a shock and then they have another shock and they wake up again.
Yeah, the double jump scare from a nightmare sequence. It's such a cliche, the double scare, because you first of all, you've got the first jump scare and then you think you're safe and then you have the second jump scare. So it's so overused.
It is, yeah. So it's the dad who sees the first guest after he's died outside the window with like the curtains blowing in the wind. That's quite a creepy shot, actually. And then after he wakes up and goes downstairs to get some water or something, he finds him dead in the fridge.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Best special effect.
My favourite special effect in the movie was the fake sumo wrestler body that they hoist out of the window.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even realise that it was fake until I heard it on the commentary. And Takashi Miike says they just physically could not hoist this guy up and hang him naked outside the window.
Yeah.
They just couldn't do it. So they made a big silicone version of him and dropped him out of the window. Dropped that out.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I didn't realise
it's very lifelike.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was fake either.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's totally fake.
Special effect for me, I did like the zombie dancing scene with the kind of like bloated zombie corpses doing that dance. Because it was, they were very convincing, decomposing bodies dancing. And singing, they were singing, right, at some point?
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah.
Favorite sound effect.
My favourite sound in the movie is Richard Sagawa's stomach noises after he drinks.
I was going to say that
from
too.
The Poison Lake.
Yeah. Like, what are those noises? They're the most disgusting, squelchy, oozy. Like what do they do to make that noise?
I don't know, but it's very believable though as a stomach noise.
Oh yeah, it is.
Like a really loud one. The one thing I couldn't figure out is I can understand maybe it's a cultural thing, but I recognize as a visual language doubling over, holding your stomach when you have like stomach pain.
Yeah.
But not thrusting your hand up your backside.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. It's almost like he was trying to hold it in. It's like, why don't you just go to the toilet? You're in a guest house. There are facilities.
Yes.
Most funniest moment.
Funniest moment for me was Richard's first musical number, the cabaret samba, because it's pretty impressive because he's in full sort of navy attire or marine attire, I should say, and he's accompanied by like 50 backup dancers. It seems like the whole staff of the entire hotel just singing, dancing with him. But it also starts in a really weird way because he throws a paper plane at Shizui, and she opens it up and it's just this crude drawing of her with the words in English, "I love you," but then he says, "I love you," and then it just starts a strange musical number. And it ends in a funny way as well because you realize it's just all this weird fantasy daydream that she has and she's just writhing around on the floor. Like, what?
Yeah, with all the staff just sort of around her looking concerned.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
My favourite funny moment in it, or the bit that really made me laugh out loud, was where after the scene with the manga shot that I talked about with the son, he does actually battle with the murderer and he sustains a wound.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I think he dives in front of his father, takes a knife to the gut, and the whole family gathers around him and they all sing this song with him about how sad they are that he's dying and what have you. And then they pull up his shirt and it's just like a scratch on him and he's fine.
I know, but he actually dies. Like, he thinks he's died, so he's like still and dead. And then they go, oh, it's just a scratch. And they just rub it with their fingers. And he just wakes up. It's like, oh, it's just a scratch. Like, I'm not dead.
It's fine. Yeah, he just sits there looking a bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love how the actor plays that part,
Yeah.
actually. I think he's hilarious throughout.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
All right. And that's our movie.
Hi, I'm Chris McKay. I'm the director of Renfield, and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
Okay, it's time for our final verdicts. Should the happiness of the Katakuris be resurrected from it being 6 feet under to sing and dance and be praised, or should it be hit by Grandpa's flung log of wood and plunge back down into the darkness of the oubliette, lost forever? So Marta, you have brought to us The Happiness of the Katakuris. This is probably the most bizarre film I've ever seen. Should people watch this?
I mean, well, first of all, I think that was a job well done. You asked for something weird, so there you go. I think it should be. I think it's just a testament to creativity. As we were saying, it was made in no time practically, and what he was able to accomplish is so cool. It's I consider this a cult film. I think it carries so many characteristics of what makes a cult film, and I think it's a great example of one. So yeah, if people want something truly bizarre, look no further.
Yes. How about you, Conrad?
Well, yes, famously, I am not a fan of musicals. I have to say, if you combine that with this sort of completely random approach to story and characterization, songs, visual aesthetic, and yeah, just make it this bizarre and difficult to follow. It's not going to help it win me over, unfortunately. On second viewing, I did appreciate it more because I wasn't just sitting in complete stunned horror, holding my notepad. I wrote nothing during the first viewing. I just literally looked just terrified at what was happening in front of me. So I can appreciate it. And I think if you do want something really bizarre, and if what we've described to you sounds like you'd be, just with a few friends, with a few drinks and just having a time of your life, you will enjoy it. But if you're not fond of something that's really challenging, and not challenging in the way that Mike usually is, pushing sexual boundaries and taboos, for example, but just out and out, just insane. This will probably leave you cold. I have to say, it left me cold, but I appreciate it. I respect it, but it didn't do anything for me personally.
Right. Well, this movie is, yes, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. I don't think my mother would appreciate this movie at all.
No.
But it is right up my alley in terms of bizarre. Like, I used to watch a lot of movies like this, just like trying to find movies that really challenged me. And I had a lot of fun with this. Like, I don't think I've laughed so hard in a movie before. Like, every time a musical number started, it was just like hilarious to me. Like, just the tonal shift from horrifying to whimsical is just hysterically funny for me. I can't describe it. And yeah, I love his kind of approach to like not giving a shit and making it look ugly on purpose. Like, I think that's brilliant. So I would recommend it to people that like challenging movies. And I mean, I'm so glad I got to finally watch this movie as well, because it's been on my watch list for many, many years, and it definitely lives up to the hype of being utterly insane.
Well, we better find out what our patrons think. Hello, Hal.
Yes, Conrad. I can't believe you've done 150 episodes of this.
Yes, thanks, Hal. Patrons vote, please.
You'll never guess. They want to set it free.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't expecting that. This is a very, I would say, polarizing movie.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised too, and the comments are mixed. But yeah, on the whole, they thought that it should be set free.
Wow.
Eddie Coulter says, "Let go, full footloose out of the oubliette. This is the kind of remake I like, where they took the original concept and put their own spin on it. One of Miike's best films, in my opinion."
Wow.
Jasmine said, "I'm not sure what I just witnessed or how I feel about it. Some of the musical numbers work great, a few of them are awkward and seem inappropriate. The claymation's unique but totally off-putting, especially when live heads are superimposed on it.
Yes.
The entire ending is just baffling in how the plot is seemingly resolved, but it never ceased to be entertaining, so I think I would tentatively release it from the oubliette." So it's kind of a, I don't know. I wasn't bored.
Yeah.
And Shazilla says, "I responded to one of the patron polls saying maybe try something out of genre, and Dan and Conrad didn't disappoint with this fever dream. I love the claymation sequences, even if some of it was nightmare fuel. This was the theatre of the bizarre right from the opening sequence. A live-action anime musical zombie family comedy. Somebody had some opium in their sake."
Ooh. It is a trip for sure.
It is, yeah. "Not even the movie Oubliette could contain this madness, so let it out." So there you go. On the whole, people just couldn't make any sense of it, but had a good time.
Yeah, that's great. Good to hear. All right, let's set it free.
Yeah, so thank you, Marta, for bringing it to us, because we
You're
would
very
never have
welcome.
naturally come to this movie, I don't think.
I mean, I think I would have, but yeah, I'm not sure that Conrad would have.
No.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
It's my absolute pleasure. I'm happy I got to watch it again. I rented it on Apple. Now I'm wondering why I don't own it. I'm probably going to try and find the Arrow release of it if I can. But yeah, thank you for having me on. This was a blast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on and giving your insight into this movie and Japanese cinema. Where can our listeners find you and follow you and look forward to your content?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. They can find me at marta.mcfly. That's on Instagram, TikTok, I believe X as well, or it's a variation of that. I write very long letterboxd reviews. That's just Marta McFly, no period. And then my podcast, McFly's Movie House, that's on, the usual suspects, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, et cetera, et cetera. So that's me.
Oh. What movies have you got coming up on your podcast?
I'm trying to think. What did we do this week? We covered The Swimmer by Frank Perry, which I highly recommend. It's one of my favorite watches of last year. Next week, we have an episode, a 3-movie chat on Jacques Demy's romance trilogy, which are also musicals, one of the few musicals that I like. What else do we have coming on? We have an episode on Nick Cage and just highlighting my favorite performances of Nick Cage. And you never know what's going to be on the podcast. It's sometimes highbrow, sometimes lowbrow. So
What are some of your favorite Nick Cage performances?
Face Off, of course.
Yes.
Con Air, Vampire's Kiss, which I saw you guys did an episode on. I really like that
we
one.
did.
He's just fantastic. I love Nick Cage. I think he's truly a man that loves movies, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, we enjoy it when we get the full Nick Cage. We've done a
Yes.
couple of his films, Season of the Witch, which you really didn't get full Cage, and then Vampire's Kiss, which was just chef's kiss in terms of full
Yeah.
Nick Cage insanity, which
I call
we
it
loved.
Cage Rage. So
Oh, yeah.
beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah, I think he's in a sort of a resurged Renaissance period as well now. Like I find like all those movies now are just like wow.
Yeah.
What a
I loved
role.
Mandy. Mandy was incredible in my opinion. A Dream Scenario, which he did somewhat recently. I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
yeah,
thought
I
that
haven't
was
seen
amazing.
Dream Scenario yet, but yeah, Renfield, Just like phenomenal Dracula.
Amazing.
And listeners, if you want to follow us, Movie Oubliette, you can find us on all platforms as Movie Oubliette. And also you can email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you'd like to support the show, head on over to Patreon, where for as little as $1, you can nominate films for us to cover in future episodes and gain access to extended portions of the show. And for $5, you can vote on the final verdict and get access to our exclusive monthly minisodes. And for $10, you can be an executive producer like Chazilla, Eddie Coulter, Isaac Sutton, Dr. Doggy, Serge, Iconographer, and Brian A. Potter.
Many thanks for your support. We have merchandise on Redbubble. We've got a YouTube channel as well. And if you haven't already, give us a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever you listen to us on. It does help us spread the word of the Oubliette.
It does indeed, yes.
So, what's up next, Conrad? Another musical? What's in the next episode?
No, we're going to be doing werewolves for the first time in a very long time. But this time it'll be in my native land. We'll be covering the 2002 British action horror film, Dog Soldiers.
Oh, yes. I've been meaning to watch this movie for so long, and I keep hearing things about it. Also, I haven't seen enough werewolf movies, so I'm very excited to cover this.
Yeah, this is a unique one to start with, so it should be a fun time. Directed by Neil Marshall and written by Neil Marshall, and starring Sean Pertwee, Liam Cunningham, Kevin McKidd, and Emma Cleesby.
Ooh, looking forward to it. Thanks again, Marta, for joining us on this episode, and maybe we'll get you on again in a future episode. This has also been our 150th episode, so a big milestone. Okay, listeners, until next time. Goodbye.
Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
Great Grandpa lives an easy life telling lies and being selfish.